Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. I'm Stephanie Aylworth-Russell, and I am the Economic Development Manager for Georgia Municipal Association and the Program Manager for the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative for Georgia Cities Foundation. I'm really glad everyone's here today, and I wanted to let everybody know that please feel free to use the chat box for any questions as we go through the presentation today, and I'll try to address those as we go, or we can address them afterwards. I'll be doing a presentation for you, and then we have a workshop component of this virtual session. So that always is a little bit tricky, but it'll be really fun, and I'll be able to unmute you for that portion of the session. So I'm going to get started, and I appreciate everyone attending the Priming Your Community for Place-Based Economic Development. Pull up my presentation. So I want to get started with an introduction of place-based economic development. It is based in placemaking theory. And placemaking is how people are more collectively and intentionally shaping our world and our future on this planet. And that quote comes from Project for Public Spaces, who I will reference quite frequently in this presentation. We use a lot of their theory. They're the mavericks for placemaking internationally. They've been around for about 30 years. And we use a lot of their philosophy and their processes as we're teaching our communities place-based economic development theory and practices. So before we start, I want to give you kind of a quick and dirty history about city and community development. So we're going to start in the 18th and early 19th centuries, and this is a time where cities are just moving into this industrial era. So what really drives development in cities across the United States is the railroad. And it's the prominent mode of transportation, and it's for goods, industries, and it eventually goes from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. And it really begins this focus on transportation-based economic and community development. But prior to the railroad being developed fully out, you look at these cities, and the downtown was the city. That's where people worked, that's where people lived, that's where people recreated. They were walkable, they were livable, it was the center of social elements, and they were also very diverse. You had different socioeconomic statuses all living in the same location, and they were the economic centers. So then we move into the mid-19th, late 19th centuries, and this becomes what we call the transportation era. And railroads have completely expanded industry. You're starting to see some sprawl. You start to see suburban development. And you start to see commercial districts engage. So then we move into, I love this photo, by the way, of these women driving this car. We move into the early 20th, mid 20th centuries, and we're looking at what's called the second motor age. And this is extensive road development. So the National Highway Act passed, and you see highways being built all across the nation. This is when we start seeing this decentralized downtown, because we're going to get into suburbanization in just a little bit. So downtown's character starts changing, and it becomes automobile-centric instead of people-centric. And then we move into the mid-20th, late 20th century, and we move into the suburbs. This is probably one of the most damaging elements that happen next to the automobile for downtowns and for downtown living. It really separated the socioeconomic and demographics. And you had your suburbanites, and then you had your city dwellers, and they tended to be of a lower socioeconomic status. So this is suburban-focused development. It's targeted to a very specific demographic, get people out of the cities. They no longer have to worry about getting to their jobs in the cities because they can commute with their cars. We also see the development of shopping malls at this point. So it takes the focus of economic centricity of a downtown outside of the downtown and moves it into the suburbs so that everything is slowly migrating outside of the downtown. The downtowns start to become neglected. And this is where we start to see some real changes in the character of the downtowns as we move into the late 20th century. And this, once again, is based on this individual automobile city planning. And we still see this type of planning going on in our cities, and we're going to address that and why it's important to prime your city for place-based economic development. Jane Jacobs was a local philanthropist and activist when it comes to place-based and people-based city development. She said cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they're created by everybody. She started this movement in the 60s and the 70s, and it caught on with some city planners, and then it disappeared. So we move into the late 20th and early 21st centuries, and this is this revision of downtown and place-based development. We start seeing people come around to this idea. And we see this in historic preservation. We see this in some other programs, specifically like the Main Street program and other downtown-centric programs. Because internet and online businesses become a big thing, retail is starting to decline. And with COVID, we could talk for hours about that, but we start seeing this transition in the late 20th, early 21st century. Then we hit that recession, which we all enjoyed thoroughly, and this also put more focus on revitalization of downtown and also this revitalization of sense of place. Alternative transportation becomes a big deal with environmental issues and also with equity and inclusion. So you start to see cities start to really take into consideration, how can we plan for alternative transportation? And then this goes into that idea of sustainability, not just environmental sustainability, but also economic and social sustainability. So this is where this transition happens. And this is where we find ourselves at, dealing with diversity and inclusion, which should have been something that was dealt with 100 years ago, and we're just now starting to crack the ice on this. And that includes cultural and heritage preservation as well. So place-based development is based on these trends that started happening when people started realizing that they had lost their sense of place, particularly in their downtowns. Downtowns are some of the best places to start place-based economic development. Not that you can't do it in your entire community, which we suggest, but downtowns are ideal locations to start this type of development. For those of you who do not know Ed McMahon, he is a brilliant mind. We had him speak at our collaborative last year, and he says that downtowns are important because they're the heart and soul of any community. Who wants to go to a strip center and hang out? People just go and buy what they want and then they leave. But people will go to the downtowns of America and they will hang out and they will come back. And I love this part. He says that was our model of development in this country for about 300 years. We called it a town. And this goes back to this quick and dirty history that I just shared with you. The original towns in America were downtowns. They were centered around all the activity of the community. And we'd like to prime our communities to go back to that philosophy and back to that model. So let's get into why we practice place-based economic development. So community leaders across the country, the state, and in our cities really truly share a desire. They want to create high quality jobs, get more young adults and other workers into those jobs. And that means expanding incomes, reducing inequality, reducing aging out. That's a serious problem we're having, particularly in the state of Georgia and in rural Georgia, and keeping their core industries competitive in the face of rising global competition and opportunity. So these are a few reasons why you'd want to get into the practice of place-based economic development. Unfortunately, traditional practices of economic development are very ill-suited to the goals that we just mentioned. So traditional economic development is composed of long-standing practices of building housing, retail centers, and having that hope, oh, we're going to build this suburban subdivision and this retail center, and attracting target industries. And not that we don't want to recruit target industries, but there's a better way to do this. And this practice tends to be antiquated. It often is very costly when we come to incentivizing. It's zero sum, and it does very little to address social gaps in our community that we are facing currently. So we want to talk about some new practices. Communities are moving away from traditional economic development strategies to a new model of economic growth. And this can lead to long-term sustainability and prosperity. The model we'll be discussing today focuses on enhancing your community's existing market assets and capabilities. And this helps the community boost their trade and increase the value of advanced industries. And it creates income and opportunities for all workers. So after decades of focusing on target industry and recruitment, which is traditional economic development practices, handing out costly incentives, or building clusters of startups and pad-ready sites, economic development practitioners are finally focusing back on people and people-centric economic development. This is a very holistic approach, and as I go through this process, you're going to see that it is a long-term practice that we are trying to teach our communities to engage in. So now that you have an understanding of why you would want to practice place-based economic development, we're going to talk a little bit about what is place-based economic development. So place-based economic development is designed to encourage collaborative and integrative approaches to make a holistic improvement in the physical, the civic, and the social environments in your community. So it's a bottom-up approach. And that's very much different than traditional economic development, which is a top-down method. So place-based models use local facilitation to identify and bring resources to the entire community. And this is consistent with neighborhood level priorities. So we're looking at the community as a whole, and we're approaching this practice from bottom up instead of top down. Because we're using a bottom up practice and we're addressing community needs, this becomes a model that is inclusive and equitable. And that's really important. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So the place-based model has demonstrated certain advantages when dealing with complex issues such as business development, job creation, affordable housing, because it does have this inclusive and equitable component to it. And then the other component it has is that it builds on the unique features and social assets of a community. We're going to talk some more about this as well. The idea behind place-based economic development is that it enhances quality of life, it creates a sense of place and identity, and it creates community visioning. So the visioning in the community is done collectively, and the planning in the community is done collectively. This is a huge paradigm shift. As we've been introducing this economic development place-based theory to our communities, we've had to change our way of thinking. And the way of thinking of the elected officials and of all the stakeholders. And this paradigm shift goes from creating the top-down approach to doing inclusive and prosperous community focus, increasing innovation and technology so that that is available to everybody. It's a better utilization of community assets, and even some of our communities just having an understanding of what their assets are has been a big step. It's a way to implement your community vision versus just a vision of one or two people that are that represent your leadership. And one of the other things that it really truly addresses is decline in spatial inequality. And that is a huge issue that's been a white elephant in community development for centuries. So I love this quote. Mayor Nancy Harris is one one of my favorite visionaries, and she's the mayor of the city of Duluth, Georgia. And they've been practicing place-based economic development for about 15 years. And it starts in her mind with the idea of vision, and we'll get to that. But she says there are unique and interesting subtleties that belong to every city. Just as Shakespeare's Hamlet quotes from the play, "To thine own self be true," each city must identify its own self and be true to its local character. Staying true to the roots that give a place its mojo is critical to a project's success. One of the things that I love about this is that she understands how to get vision out of her community members. She's very much a maverick in this regard. So before we move forward, I really want to talk a little bit about place-based economic development and how diversity, equity, and inclusion relates to this theory. So really quickly, diversity is that presence of differences that may include race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, language, populations that have traditionally been underrepresented among development practitioners. So when we're talking about diversity, we want to ask the question, who in the community has been invited to sit at the development process table? So that's the first where we start, is who's been invited to sit at the table. Is our table diverse? Equity deals with promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within any type of procedures, processes, or distribution of resources within a community. So if we want to tackle the equity question, we have to have an understanding of the root causes of outcomes and disparity in our society. So relative to development, the question we need to be asking if we're going to tackle equity is, what are the barriers to getting to and staying at the table? Does the table have blocks for the demographic in the community? And what are those blocks? And how can we get rid of those? And that goes into inclusion. So inclusion is that outcome to ensure that there are diverse representation at the development table, but that people actually feel and are welcomed at the development table. So the question we ask in this regard is, do all feel that they belong at the development table? These three issues need to be addressed before you engage in place-based economic development, because once again, it is a bottom-up strategy that is inclusive and requires a community vision. So one of the things that a couple things that we do in the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative to tackle diversity, equity, and inclusion is, the first thing out of the gate, we do a demographic analysis of the city and community that we're working with. We then go in and teach them how to do asset inventory and mapping, and engage in public meetings or charrettes, just to get some public input started. And as you're doing these meetings and charrettes, you're looking for cultural representation to put on your stakeholder teams, on your city boards, and on your city committees. You're looking for that representation that represents that demographic. And then once you have these pieces in place, it's really important that they're integrated into your development projects. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Georgia Placemaking Collaborative. And it's a 3-year program, and it's based in economic development, place-based economic development theory. And we provide participating communities with education, facilitation, technical assistance, networking, peer learning, and incentives to help identify their community assets, and then develop a locally based placemaking strategy. And that strategy is rooted in project development. We are very focused on training the community how to do economic development projects, both small and large, that have place-based components to them. So year one, we do education, visioning, and planning. Year two is project development, funding, and implementation. And then year three is tracking and impact analysis. We want to be able to show that the process has been implemented and that it has an impact on the community. These are our wonderful partners. We could not manage this program without our wonderful partners: Georgia Cities Foundation, the Georgia Conservancy, Georgia Power, Georgia Department of Community Affairs, Georgia Tech, Carl Vinson Institute of Government, and Georgia Municipal Association. And these are our facilitators. This is what really makes everything come together. So our facilitators work with each community, and each community has its own facilitator for the 3 years. So they stay with them through 3 years of this program. And they go through the program with them. And each team is paired up with the facilitator for the entire time. We're going into our 3rd year of programming, so we'll be going into the tracking analysis phase very soon. So the program objectives are to discover what a community wants through community-led visioning, planning, and project development. Just like I said, this is very based in project development. And the product is to create an action and implementation plan, and that includes asset inventories and the 5 placemaking steps, which I'll go over very briefly. I really want to talk about asset inventories. It's really important coming out of the gate that a community understands what they have, not just their demographic, because we do that for them, but we have them do an asset inventory. And looking at your assets of your community, you want to look at your natural assets, your tourism assets, your physical assets, your economic assets, your local associations, your local institutions, and your local stakeholders. Stakeholders are really important in this piece. And then you map them out so that you can have a visual for your team as you're working through your goals for the 3 years. We constantly come back to the assets because it's when you're doing bottom-up economic development, that's your base, and that's where you start, and you build on what you already have. And a lot of our communities, for those of you who may not know, in the state of Georgia, 75% of our cities have a population of 5,000 or less. Their assets are really important to discover because they may not have a lot of financial resources to build things and unique things. So we really try to go, and this really goes back to the idea of heritage and cultural preservation and going into the community and what I call mining the community for their narrative. What are you, who are you, and what are you going to put out there to attract business and to attract residents so that your community can continue to grow and can continue to thrive. So we utilize the 5 steps of placemaking as defined by Project for Public Spaces. Once again, they've been in this business for over 30 years, and they are internationally recognized as the gurus of placemaking. We've taken their steps and utilized them in a more economic development approach. But it starts out with defining place and identifying your stakeholders. Then you go in and you evaluate your spaces and you identify the issues in your community that are affecting those spaces. Then you go into what I think is the most important part, and that's this place vision, this community-led place visioning, where you bring your stakeholder team together and you start creating that vision. We teach our teams to thread that vision from the very beginning all the way through their project development into the maintenance part of their project development. You never let go of the vision. It stays with the project the entire time. One of the really great things about Project for Public Spaces is that they do these short-term experiments. So it teaches the teams how to do these low-risk projects that are really great. And then they can go and evaluate those projects, see how the community responded to them, and see how they can make some improvements to them to make them more effective before they take on really large projects. So we do what I would consider public projects, and those are a lot more placemaking focused, like creative placemaking focused murals, parklets, things that the city can partner with the teams on. But then we really do teach the teams how to move into economic development projects that are large, like capital projects, working with private developers, and making sure that as private developers are coming in, that those private developers have an understanding that this is a sense of place here, this is our vision. If you want to develop in our community, you have to jump on board with the vision. And we've had some really great successes, particularly with our first year cities that have been able to go from doing these short-term experiments to really getting into the place-based economic development piece of working with private developers and having those developers adopt the vision of the teams. So this is a really exciting program, and in the short term that it's been active, we've had some incredible results. So currently there are 10 cities participating. We decided that we're going to add 3 cities and 3 new facilitators in 2021. So we added 3 cities and shifted our program to 2021. So that means we're adding an extra 6 cities in 2021 and an extra 3 facilitators. We are going to open up that application process this month. Applications should be online to participate in the Placemaking Collaborative this Friday on the Georgia Cities Foundation website. And we're always in the market for new partners and facilitators. We are constantly expanding funding and incentive opportunities for our teams. That's one of the benefits of participating, is that we do have some incentives for project development. We continue to market the program, and we will always track the program. So that's the information on the Georgia Placemaking Collaborative and on place-based economic development. I'm going to open it up for just a couple minutes for some questions, and then we're going to move into the workshop portion of this, which is really, really fun. If anyone has, Danny Bivens is my hero. I'm looking through the chat really quick because I had the presentation up. Renee, great question. The RSVP is basically a design program, and the RSVP program complements the Placemaking Collaborative. The Placemaking Collaborative is a process. We're teaching a process. So we oftentimes, the cities that are participating that have done an RSVP or fellows, they often utilize that RSVP in the planning and visioning section of the program. So I hope that answers your question. All right, Sadie, I'm unmuting you. Hi, Sadie.
Hi, good morning.
So we have a really cool video that Sadie's going to introduce, and we're going to play for you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we put this together. I'm kind of walked through our downtown and showed some of the end results of our placemaking that we've done in downtown Monroe. So it just kind of gives a visual. This was formed a while ago, but all these things are still there, and we've added some more. And that's the thing, is that you lay down these building blocks and you can continue to build on them as you get more feedback from the community and interaction from the community. So you'll get to see these, and this has been where we've kind of leaned in heavily during COVID as well, as how do we enhance some of these and do more of this kind of work. There you go.
Fantastic, great segue.
So hey, we're in downtown Monroe. We're gonna walk you around, show you some of our projects. And the first one we want to show you is our Monroe mural. We got a local window painter and a grant from the Georgia Council for the Arts, and she designed a Monroe mural that kind of identifies you are here now, and she designed it with images that define Monroe and downtown. And we did this a couple years ago and got a facade easement on this private building. The Council for the Arts paid for half of it, and then we raised local funds to pay for the rest of it. So that's the first project, and we'll keep walking, and you'll see our planters that we use sponsorship money to replant every year, and our streetscaping to try to create a great sense of place downtown. So let's go and walk. So we're inside Elevate Outfitters and Coffee Camper in Monroe, and just an example of how our local businesses have really jumped on the idea of branding this as a place. It's in all their logos, and they're actually working on a mural on the outside of their building right now. It's going to feature a mountain scene and talk about Monroe.
800 cash, that's a flip a deal. I'm headed downtown. cruising through the alley.
So here's a building that's being renovated now, and you can see it's an older mural. It says "Welcome to Downtown Monroe." It points out parking in Children's Park. So the cool thing they did is, rather than just cover it with construction, they used historic photos to tell the story of the building's progress over the years.
In the air, stop by Pike Place, throwing fish to a play. Downtown, 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 downtown. She has her arms around your waist. You're the balance that will keep her safe.
Our first murals we did in partnership with Monroe Walton Center for the Arts and some other local nonprofits that help pay for it and sponsor it. This is a city-owned building, so it was the easiest place to start, and this alleyway connects our historic courthouse and public parking. So we're trying to activate this alley to get people parking here and walking back and forth, and just have another space to take pictures.
Better follow me towards downtown. What you see is what you get, girl. Don't ever forget, girl. Ain't seen nothing yet until you're downtown. Look, cut the, get off my mother. Stonewall so raw, I'm play like a bullet.
All right, here's our pocket park. The old safe in it. This is one of our first projects we did downtown, and we're actually about to do a major refresh to this one. Add some more shading. It has a little library hidden in there behind the bushes.
Had one helmet, I would give it to you. Give it to you. Cruising down Broadway, girl, what a wonderful view. Wonderful view. There's layers to the player.
Here we are at the Hammock Park, and it's also our Project Road Share, which is a map of cycling trails throughout Walton County. And this was funded through a crowdfunding campaign. This, along with some other play equipment around town, a Places to Play campaign. We raised $15,000 to do this, an activity alley, and add some new swings and slides to a passive park we have in downtown. Right now, this is our activity alley where we've painted stencils on the asphalt. We did a mural here. People take pictures with this one a lot. We have instruments along the wall. This is also part of our crowdfunding. We had a local realtor group give us donations for some of the instruments. We had Kiwanis Club give us another donation for instruments. And I should have mentioned Rotary gave us a donation for Hammock Park. So a lot of our civic clubs kind of jumped in when they saw us doing crowdfunding and matched a lot of what individuals gave.
She has her arms around your waist. You're the balance that will keep her safe. Have you ever felt the warmth?
Now we're in front of City Hall, and this is a project we did. Just get one of our farmers market woodworkers to build some chairs, get community service kids, paint them, and put them around the fountain. The community brought us this idea. They'd seen it somewhere else and shared it on Facebook, and we helped make it happen.
Girl, don't ever forget, girl. Ain't seen nothing yet until you're downtown. You don't want no beef. Y'all are on the streets.
Let me see if there's any questions before we move into. There was one. Okay.
Yeah. Someone asked, are there guidelines for business owners that do their own murals? No, we actually don't have any of those officially in place. What happens is when people want to do something, they typically reach out to us, which if you're worried about controlling everything, I guess there really is no official control in place except just the relational connection with our office, that they say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. How do we do it? Do you have artists? And we help be the connection point. But we don't really have a way to regulate that on privately owned buildings. It's their walls. If it's signage, so they're kind of using it as part of their signage, then that would trigger like the sign permit process, and it would have to get a certificate of appropriateness. Like the mural that was in that video that was getting started, that actually did get a certificate of appropriateness from our Historic Preservation Commission because it was going to be a large new sign in the historic district. But other than that, I mean, there's not guidelines. We have done a lot of them, and so by us kind of setting the example, it sets a standard, I guess, because we have done a number of them ourselves with volunteers, or we've done the design or hired people. So because we kind of set the bar, I guess that helps in some way. But no, there's not an official guideline.
And some cities do, but it's really hard to regulate because it is on private property. So it usually just, City of Atlanta has a really interesting history of trying to regulate their murals, and that's fun to research. We're running low on time, so I'm going to pop into the workshop piece really quick. This is really, we're going to go through this a little bit quicker than I wanted to, but it gives you an introduction to what we do in the Placemaking Collaborative and how you can look at your community from a place-based economic development perspective. So let me pop this up really quick, and we're going to have you guys participate in this. So this is the workshop, and I'm using one of our communities is Canton. Oops. Go back. So one of our communities is Canton, and they've got a Latino commercial and residential corridor inside their city limit, and it's near their downtown. So today we're going to go through this exercise, and you're going to look at creating a place-based development project idea and a strategy that is equitable to the demographics of this corridor, inclusive for the community as a whole, and might address an economic or community development need or issue that's happening in this community, and something that's trackable that the city and supports the city vision for the corridor. So here's your Canton demographics, and I'm not going to go through those because we don't have time, but I can come back to the slide as you guys are thinking about these ideas. So the city vision for this corridor is to highlight the Latino identity and culture, augment the commercial potential of the corridor businesses, develop amenities for the residents and the visitors that would come to that corridor, and create alternative transportation opportunities to connect the corridor to the new Etowah Mills and historic downtown. The new Etowah Mills is a renovated mill that's got a whole bunch of really cool development pieces in it, including a brewery. Reformation Brewery moved into there, and it's right by this trail system and right by the river. And it's the bridge between the historic downtown and this Latino community. And then to create new partnerships that contribute to the job creation and increase in tax base in that corridor. So here's new Etowah Mills right here. Here is the historic downtown right here. Oops. And here is the Latino community right here. So the assets in that community, remember assets are really important. We do asset inventory before we do anything else, is active and organized Latino community. There's a river and a river walk right along here. There's this large green field right here that's privately owned. And then there's an underutilized baseball complex that the city owns. And then on Marietta Road are where there are Latino businesses. And then the residences surround this whole area right here. So adjacent to the newly renovated mill and Etowah complex, like I said, it's got this brewery, restaurants, co-working space. It's near the historic downtown, and it's got a lot of development properties that could be utilized. So here's a quick look at the Harmon Street Ballpark. And then you can see this area where the Latino businesses are relative to this ballpark, and then there's this big green space behind it right here. So Marietta Street right here, your Latino businesses, this big green space, ballpark, and then the residences that flank it, and then Etowah Mills, and then over here's your downtown. So what we want you guys to do in the next couple minutes is think about an equitable, inclusive project that addresses the needs and issues of that community, and that's something you can track and support the vision. So the idea, so what we're looking for is a project idea in that area and project partners. So I'm going to go back, and so we can go back to this resting slide that gives you the overall view of this. And so we would love for you guys to throw your ideas in the chat. I'm going to throw something out there to you, and that this piece of property, this big green space, is a private piece of property, but currently the community uses it to play soccer on unofficially. So I'll throw that out there just to prime the pump a little bit, and then let's see what you guys come up with. So throw some of your ideas in the chat. If you want me to unmute you, just write it in the chat that you want to be unmuted, and I'll unmute you, and you can chat. but we'd love to see what you guys come up with. We got about 10 minutes to have some discussion on this. But this is kind of one of the exercises that we do in our placemaking collaborative is we get the teams together and we start looking at particular areas of the city that have some issues that need to be addressed, particularly as it relates to the city's diversity and relates to developing out specific places in certain parts of the city. Anyone have any ideas what would be some good projects in that area that are place-based in nature? I like that, Carmine. I'm going to unmute you so you can elaborate on that.
Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, elaborate on what you wrote down there. I want to hear.
I was just looking at the map and thinking, there's a strong tradition in Latin America of like the evening promenade. So if you could incorporate that where it connects, the river or the soccer fields and maybe the baseball fields and maybe ends up at the restaurant, that would seem like a really good way to kind of thread together, different parts of that area. Everybody loves to walk, and especially doing that after dinner and related to sports fields and stuff like that. I think that could be something interesting.
No, you dove right in with the culture and the heritage and bringing something that has a historic component to it, an old world component to it. I love it. That's fantastic. I'll have to tell Billy. All right, let's see. Sylvester Ford, a park with amphitheater with businesses that can support programming with multicultural identity. Love it. That sounds great. And there's all that green space. So yeah, and you can support. And I love that you put in there with the businesses, partner up with the businesses. That truly is thinking from an economic development standpoint, because we really are trying to cultivate these partnerships with the businesses and with private entity, not just having the city come in and doing public projects. Love it. Can we convert the old baseball field into a public soccer field where league games can be played? Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, that is unused space. They built a new one, and so they aren't using the current space in any way. So that's a great idea. Mercy, hi Mercy. Purchase or partner to transform the field into community soccer gathering. So that's, when we did this last time, we had a lot of this type of the community and the soccer and the flexibility of programming. And I love this, what you put: festivals, dining events, music. It's responsive to demonstrate interest, cultural trends, and soccer is growing popularity. Soccer is huge, particularly with youth. And in this community, their socioeconomic status is not, it's a little bit lower than some of the other areas of the city. And so to be able to have a public venue would be really, really beneficial in creating that sense of place. Alan, repurpose the ball field or something the community would prefer. Yes, thank you for taking into consideration what the community wants. And that's where we go with this. We want to implement projects that the community is asking for. And I love that. Let's see. Oh, I like the idea of movable goals, Mercy. That's great. Yeah, that's always, and being able to move the goals, you can put different types of rectangle field activities in there, including lacrosse and some other activities. So that's great. And then test it out. Thank you for listening. Have an artist such as Yemi Cabron. Okay, I'm gonna unmute you because I want to hear about this one. Nadia. Nadia, talk to us about this artist.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can.
So she's an Atlanta-based artist, and she's done work in Norcross and throughout Atlanta. I believe she's Mexican of heritage, and she does different murals throughout Georgia, throughout different states as well, that celebrate diversity, inclusion, and immigration. She also educates people and is an activist. So I thought that would be interesting to tie that into the community. Especially
pass that on to Brittany and Billy, the team leaders out there.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And just, I'm going to do this quick little plug for GMA. Currently, GMA is building a new facility on our property, and we are in the process, the RFP for it's a huge mural. It's going to be like 170 feet wide, long, and it's huge. But we have an RFP for that. So if there are any artists, because we want to use a Georgia-based artist, if there are any artists that you know of, such as Yehimi, feel free to email me and I'll send you guys a copy of that RFP and you can distribute it out in your communities. We'd love to get as many people apply for this project as possible. And we'd love to see something that's unique and diverse and that can capture the spirit of Georgia cities on our huge wall. That's our parking structure. Slight tangent there. Any other ideas? These are all really great. Well, if not, I'll wrap up. Thank you for attending Place-Based Economic Development. And as you can see, it's a very different approach, but it's not something that should be unfamiliar to you as downtown development professionals, because you do work a lot with your community and you have intimate relationships. This just expands it so that it brings it into a bigger breadth of vision. So the community is working with the leadership, and they're working with developers, and they're working with this overall vision that includes the downtown, and the downtown is always going to be a big part of it, but it's an overall city and community vision. And it doesn't even have to fall within the boundaries of a city. It can be a region or an area. We'll be bringing in an Atlanta neighborhood into the program next year, hopefully 2 Atlanta neighborhoods next year. So it doesn't have to have boundaries, but what it does have to have is inclusion and diversity. And the projects that we want to see need to be complementary to the community and augment the community so that you can create that sense of place. So that's really our ultimate goal, is training communities how to do this process so that the process goes on and on and on. And it's a different approach, and we don't go back to that traditional top-down, oh, we're out there fishing for a developer, oh, we're out there looking for businesses to recruit, when you can be focused on building your foundation up, and then the businesses will come, and it's easier to recruit them because you have a unique narrative and you have a community that is pulled together and is unified. So that's truly the basis behind this, and we're excited. And if you are interested in participating in our Placemaking Collaborative, once again, we've got room for 3 more cities next year. The application will be going out this week, or feel free to just drop me an email and I'll send one to you. Sadie, did you have anything else you'd like to say? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for participating. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You can call me or email me. I'm always available, and it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. So, thanks for participating today. Have a great rest of the conference.